unmute myself. That probably will help. And we're going to start on chapter 13. This is crazy. And tonight I will be on the Pond Trump Frog and Stellar show, and I have been doing a series with Alpha about the World Anti-Communist League, and I am going to talk a little bit about it just as an overview, kind of a summary, if you will. And I got to tell you guys, as much research as I've done on this topic in the CIA and just how evil all of this is, and you guys know that I have said repeatedly, there was something about the World Anti-Communist League when we first discovered it that just kind of gnawed at the back of my brain, like there was something much more to it. It is like the most, of all of the organizations, and we found several, it's the single worst criminal element of a criminal enterprise that I've come across. The more I research it, the more evil I find out it is. And one of the most evil parts of it is how many freaking military officers are embedded throughout all of it. I mean, it's just dumbfounding to me how bad it is. So we're going to do tonight on the Pond kind of just a 50,000 foot look overview of where we're at in the Alpha Warrior series, but I do encourage everybody to go watch the entire series, especially the next couple of shows. The next couple of shows is going to curl your toes, because the show we're going to do this Wednesday night is talking about the element that was in the Americas. And of course, because it's in the Americas, it is made up primarily of Americans, and a lot of our senior military people were part and parcel of it. And it does go through many of the coups that we've talked about over the course of time in Guatemala and Honduras and Nicaragua and Chile and that type of thing. And there seems to have been a hidden hand through all of that was the World Anti-Communist League. And that to me is just dumbfounding. And again, I have read like 71 books on this. And this book called Inside the League is the first book of all of them that really ties that invisible hand that cuts across all of what we saw in Southeast Asia, all of what we saw in Europe in the series that we've been doing here. It literally cuts across all of them. And so I want to do kind of a high level overview so you guys can see and kind of put that into context. Because in addition to the World Anti-Communist League, they had tentacles. And I'm going to throw you out a couple if you guys are so inclined to want to look at this before tonight. But try to add Froggy. All right. Do you want me to drop you down, Bridget? She said she lost sound. So I'm going to move her down and I'll bring her back. If I can find her.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah, if you find Bridget, can you bring her up as a speaker, and then just let her know to let me know she's back. Thank you, Trump Frog.
My pleasure.
So the other couple of organizations that we will briefly go over. I'll go over them at length when we get to this part in the series with Alpha Warrior, but just so you guys can know, because I think the irony of all ironies of this is the names of these organizations. Now, I want you to keep in mind, these are all terrorist organizations, okay? They were organized, set up, people served on their boards to include the who's who of corporate America and the military. And every one of these were set up with the sole purpose of orchestrating terror all over the world. Okay, so let's name a few of them since I love doing that. Western Goals, Goals, Western Goals. Western Goals was set up, and it was the brainchild of a guy that I came across several times by the name of John P. McDonald. He was a U.S. representative. He was also the chairman of the John Birch Society, which of course comes up often in Operation Gladio. And he also was killed when Korean airline flight 007 in September 1983 crashed. So that's very interesting. And we've looked into that a couple of different times. I love the number 007. And so McDonald was very much part of the Operation Gladio World Anti-Communist League setup. And he also described Martin Luther King as a man, quote unquote, wedded to violence, unquote. Because, you know, they accuse you of what they're doing. And again, we'll go into a little bit of the Western Goals, but another one is called Council for the Defense of Freedom. Don't you love those names? This is a terrorist organization. Council for the Defense of Freedom. Their freedom because they're oppressive to everyone else. And you will find a common denominator when you look any of these up. The CIA Wikipedia version of all of these is they're all anti-communist fighting organizations, which again is clear text for Operation Gladio. My favorite, and I've done an actual show on this, was called the American Security Council. And if you look up the American Security Council, it has a very interesting background because American Security Council started off as a, hold on, I want to make sure I say this properly. The American Security started off as a organization that was created by Robert Wood, who was the guy that owned Sears and Roebuck. Yeah, the big catalog guy. And he set this organization up, the actual council. He had a foundation too. Don't pay attention to that. The actual council was basically set up to do newspaper clippings into files that they sold to U.S. businessmen to do background checks on people that they either wanted to hire or blackmail or whatever. They were the FBI before the FBI, the American Security Council. That's how they were actually set up originally. And it had an affiliate called the Coalition for Peace Through Strength. Yeah. And that organization was set up with the United States Council for World Freedom. Now, they weren't interested in anybody actually having freedom. And two of the people that you find on almost all of these is General Singleb. And you remember General Singleb because he's the guy that came over to Vietnam and brought all of the Filipino people that were assassins and that they had already been trained through Taiwan to kill all of the Vietnamese in their death squads there. Yeah, so General Singleb shows up on a bunch of these, as does his buddy, shows up on a bunch of these. His last name is Graham. I'll remember his first name in a minute. But a lot of them, Reed, Irving, they all show up on the same council. So that's another one. Council for Inter-American Security. Now, that was another Singleb organization. This one actually had a whole bunch of very interesting people on it, to include the Unification Church, you know, the Korean Reverend Moon paramilitary organization that had the 300,000 acre farm of poppies down in Paraguay. Yeah, that same church was on the Council for Inter-American Security. Then you had another organization, the Conservative Caucus, and they refer to all of these organizations as a thing called the New Right. And of course, you guys know that I don't use the terms right and left, but they refer to this, it should be referred to as the new fascism in the United States, and quite frankly in the world, because that's exactly excuse me, that's exactly what it was. We found out a whole bunch about this because, let me read you just this one little quote, then we'll get started on our chapter. The New Right government has had issues such as in 1984, the American Civil Liberties Union was in the process of suing the Los Angeles Police Department Intelligence Division, which had maintained files on enemies of the state. That's actually what they called the list. As the First Unitarian Church in the National Lawyers Guild described it, when the ACLU discovered that the Intelligence Division of the Los Angeles Police Department had removed those files from their office, one in particular, J. Paul, was discovered to have had a garage full of these reports. Reminds you of Joe Biden, which he had computerized and sent to a nonprofit called Western Goals, located in Alexandria, Virginia. The foundation's executive director finally turned over the documents to a California grand jury after negotiating immunity from prosecution. So again, these are our police departments compiling lists of American citizens and basically selling them to these entities in the quote unquote new right called fascism, which basically were like kill list or harass list or whatever you want to call it, enemies of the state. And this was not the only one. That's just one of the most well-documented ones. All right, so having said that, let's go ahead and get started on Prelude to Terror, chapter 13, which is political, like perfect transition. This chapter is called Politicizing Intelligence, and it starts off with George Bush and the quote unquote inherited CIA headquarters that had major disputes between the CIA professional intelligence staff and political conservatives that were outside the formal intelligence community. The critics, like Richard Pearl, Richard Pipes, Major General Daniel Graham, and other quote unquote hawks, who said the CIA was being too soft on the Soviets in their military assessments. Now, oh, by the way, that Major General Daniel Graham is the Graham I was just talking about in the other book, just so you guys know. Also, Richard Pearl is the guy that with Frank Luntz wrote the PR document that was given to Israel for Israel to give to the United States on how to market the going into Iraq. So Israel wanted the US to attack Iraq. They commissioned Richard Pearl and Frank Luntz to write a PR campaign on how to sell it to Americans. Every single thing about our history, guys, has been a production from the intelligence apparatus. So, yes, these guys were definitely hawks. It was a dispute that removed barriers that eventually allowed the privatization of American intelligence. The CIA had claimed for years that since it did not set policy, its research and information was not clouded by political bias. But some conservatives believed that the CIA estimates was tinged with liberal views. They were actually tinged with fascist views, but whatever. The conservatives charged that faulty CIA estimates of Soviet strategic strength had allowed the US to sign the SALT I treaty, which had permitted the Soviets to catch up with its strategic weapons. In August 1975, the president's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board, chaired by Admiral George Anderson, wrote President Ford a letter proposing that an outside group of strategic experts be given access to the same intelligence as the CIA analysts and were allowed to prepare a competing intelligence estimate. The outside group would be called the B team. The official intelligence community would be the A team. The effort became officially known as the A-Team, B-Team experiment. The importance of bringing in outside consultants to review the CIA's work crossed a line that had never been crossed before. Bringing in outsiders legitimized the idea that the CIA had no longer was immune to any outside influences. The B-Team was the first official recognition that the CIA could be challenged by outsiders. So it was natural that once outsiders could get their nose under the tent, that the days of the CIA old boys network would soon be over. The influence of Richard Pearl and others of similar political persuasion were able to exert over intelligence operations would dramatically increase in the coming years and decades. Intelligence veterans considered the approval of the ATB team experiment a watershed. William Colby, who still was the director of the CIA, understandably was not happy with this idea at all. He intuitively knew that to allow outside critics to gain access to estimates would politicize the process that was supposed to be apolitical, which, just as a caveat here, it was never apolitical. They 100% lied about everything. So that was what they're really afraid of, and the people contributing to this book is not very clear in saying, is that it was going to expose the politicization of intelligence, not begin it. Because if you had someone else actually looking at the intelligence estimates, we saw that just play out with Ratcliffe in the exposing of how everybody refused to identify China in the COVID-19 intelligence estimate, right? So we know exactly what's going on behind the scenes because it has occasionally leaked out or been exposed, and that's what they're afraid of. Admiral Anderson, let's see, after President Ford fired Colby on January 30th, 1976, Admiral Anderson kept pressing for a new CIA director, George Bush, to set up an outside team. Bush, the first politician to hold the job, authorized the competition. Hank Nolte, Bush's top deputy, said Bush was in love with the idea because, of course, he's going to benefit from it. He signed off on the experiment. What Bush approved and Nolte agreed to was revolutionary in the American intelligence. For the first time, outsiders, many already skeptical of the CIA's work, would be given access to national intelligence estimates going back to 1959. They would be given access to all of America's classified knowledge about the Soviet military. CIA professionals had two major worries about the experiment. One was that conservatives on the B team might leak highly classified material. Not like the CIA's ever done that. The other was that the CIA's reputation for impeccable strategic research would be forever damaged. I mean, you guys, I'm rolling my eyes right now. If you're looking over on Rumble, here, let me do this for the camera. Oh my gosh. Since the experiment required the clearance of massive amounts of classified documents and thousands of hours of follow-up, the liaison position between the CIA and the B team was a key appointment. This person would control all of the documents. In early 1976, John Arthur Paisley was chosen to be the CIA coordinator for the B team. Paisley was an unprepossessing man who had worked in both the covert and overt sides of the CIA, officially a high-level analyst in the CIA's Office of Strategic Research. Paisley was in reality a long-time covert operative. Paisley was the official CIA liaison to the White House plumbers team that took Nixon out, a group of security specialists and anti-Castro Cubans that the CIA employed. He had challenged Henry Kissinger over the question of Soviet strategic capability and had broken into foreign embassies with the White House plumbers. Paisley was the subject of a book called Widows. The author wrote with the guy who wrote this book, and his wife wrote a book called Widows. Paisley's career was fascinating. There was a suspicion that he had been recruited by the Russians during World War II, having been a radar operator on merchant vessels that visited Russia during the war, because Russia was an ally. By the time Bush came on the scene, Paisley was officially retired, but in fact was still working for the CIA. Namely, naming Paisley as a coordinator of the A-Team-B team experiment was a controversial choice. It meant putting in position as a conduit for any information that the B team received, a man who had spent his entire career developing the methods the B team was about ready to criticize. Paisley's appointment may very well have been the CIA's effort at protecting its own interests. Not like it ever does that or anything. The entire effort was supposed to be secret. Both sides understood that any media leaks would endanger national security. So on December 26, 1976, when the lead story in the New York Times by David Bender said that the B team had reversed the national intelligence estimate 180 degrees, the CIA charged that the experiment had caused important national security data to be compromised. The B team's version concluded that the CIA had underestimated Soviet strategic intentions and technical capability. Members of the B team would later go on to advise that Reagan's campaign of 1980 and provide the force behind the so-called failed strategic defense initiative, Star Wars. Conservatives on the B team, including Richard Pipes Sr. and General Daniel Graham, were accused of the leaks. What? The guy that's in charge of the World Anti-Communist League subgroup would be leaking stuff that makes us think that the Soviet Union's the bad guy so that they can foment anti-communist stuff in order to kill people all over the world as part of Gladio. I'm shocked. This is my shock face. All right. Binder, a veteran newsman known for his ties to members in the intelligence community. Okay, so what they're basically saying here is the guy the CIA leaks to all the time, including James Angleton, claimed that it was Paisley who had leaked the story to him, a story Binder said was one of the most important of his career. Paisley was the most mysterious character involved in the A-Team-B team experiment. He had ties to Watergate. He also had complete access to Bush while he was at the CIA. Bush's private telephone numbers, including those at his home, were in Paisley's phone book. So he's part of the CIA. During this period, Paisley was consistently snooping around the CIA using unescorted visitor's badge. Paisley called an old colleague in the Soviet division and even in Shackley's Directorate of Operations. He had people nervous. Soviet division officials Leonard McCoy suspected that Paisley was trying to elicit information about McCoy's relationship with a young ex-Marine analyst by the name of David Sullivan. Paisley was clearly trying to get to the bottom of something. Sullivan, who was later forced to resign from the CIA for leaking classified data to Richard Pearl, told Robert Gambino in the Office of Security that he suspected that Paisley was in fact a Soviet agent. 2 years later, Paisley mysteriously disappeared while sailing on the Chesapeake Bay. A subsequent investigation revealed that a body later recovered and initially identified as Paisley was in fact not his. Paisley had never been heard from again. So I briefly looked into that, and I don't know whether it really was him, and then they decided they didn't want to have to explain another dead body, and then someone was paid to say it wasn't. Lots of kind of question marks around that whole thing. Hank Noakey finds it hard to believe that Paisley was the source of a story that was so badly damaging to the agency. It is worth noting that the leak took place after Jimmy Carter had won the election and Bush had found out that he was not going to be staying on as the director. Under Bush, the Directorate of Operations had begun to radically redesign itself in its continuing effort to find a way to operate without real accountability to Congress. Bush allowed the Directorate of Operations, being run by William Wells and his deputy, Ted Shackley, to operate almost without restraint. If the Justice Department, for example, made a request for its investigation into the CIA, officials connected to criminal wrongdoing, like in Chile, Bush, according to the Justice Department files, routinely blocked the request. Quote, "The reforms of the CIA started by the Church Committee in the 1975 hearings came to a dead halt under Bush. The goal was to hide things, not fix things," unquote. Also, William Corson said, by taking the operations and putting them in the hands of private businessmen and other countries, congressional accountability could be avoided, and that's what Bush allowed. And of course, that basically goes along with what we discovered with Edwin Wilson and them setting up the CIA front companies and embedding themselves in international companies like PepsiCo and Freeport, that they use those corporate entities to disguise what they were doing in a basically like a shadow CIA. Especially after Jimmy Carter fired almost 1,000 of them. Most looked upon the 18B team experiment as a way of opening up the CIA, but a close examination of the experiment and the personalities involved point more to it being another step on the way to a kind of privatization of a rogue intelligence entity, which we refer to as the enterprise. The CIA operation ran by a series of White House-controlled units with no accountability to Congress, which of course set up the stage for Reagan and who? Oh, that's right, Vice President Bush, the guy who staged this entire bullshit thing. So he stages this A-Team-B team thing, then uses this as a way to create basically the privatization of the intelligence infrastructure. And then he becomes vice president and uses the privatization of the intelligence network in Iran-Contra, Angola, and every other entity that was ran or operation that was ran during him being vice president with Reagan as president. In the A-Team-B team experiment, Bush allowed the conservatives a foot in the CIA door and at the same time discredited the liberals who were working inside the agencies. These conservatives would one day control the policy and practices of the intelligence community under both President Reagan and George Bush Sr. They would report in the early 1980s that America was falling behind the Soviet Union militarily and encouraged the massive buildup of American military hardware under Reagan. And under the elder Bush, they would encourage the 1991 Persian Gulf War, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, Bush Jr. goes into Iraq again. So just the perpetuation of the war machine. And they were gearing up on the privatization of the intelligence piece of this at the same time, which in reality, most of us think when I say the privatization of the CIA or intelligence apparatus, that they're actually doing intel. They're not. They've never done intel, guys. The CIA is a paramilitary goon squad. They're death squads. That's basically what they do. They coordinate overthrows of governments and death squads all over the world. And the privatization of that capability, not intelligence, because they do not do intelligence at all. That is the privatization that we're talking about. And that makes this book kind of like the kissing cousins to the World Anti-Communist League, because if you put those two books side by side and you start walking through chronologically the setting up of this prelude to terror with them setting up the apparatus of the World Anti-Communist League, they literally go hand in hand. So they're creating the privatization of the CIA, while at the same time, the World Anti-Communist League, through things like those organizations, the American Security Council and all those others, and the subordinate regional elements of the World Anti-Communist League, like the Asians People Anti-Communist League, there's one for Latin America, blah, blah, blah. Those things are all being created and that's the reason why when you read these books, again, this one book is only going to give you this one dimension. But if you put it, and it's just weirdly God intervention that I'm reading both of these books, or I've read both of these books in the same proximity, so I see the chronological order running right out in front of me of both narratives. It's actually quite crazy the way this has happened. So anyway, we are going to, because I do want to get this one last aspect, and we do, it appears, have enough time. So let's hit this chapter 14. Bush and the Safari Club. Now, keep in mind, we've already covered the World Wildlife Fund. Think about the World Wildlife Fund while we talk about the Safari Club. One of the George Bush's most significant accomplishments in his year as CIA director was to switch the agency's reliance for regional intelligence from Israel, which is who they used prior to the Bush CIA director, to shifting almost all of it to Saudi Arabia. Now, the reason that's important, everyone, is because Saudi Arabia is the one that is eventually brought into the Carlyle group, right? So Bush, when he leaves office, sets up with Jim Baker and all the rest of his cronies, the Carlyle group that goes in and buys equity stakes in all of the military industrial complex and turns this thing into, like, and Cheney's in there, turns it into like billions, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of equity, and then sells a minority share to Saudi Arabia. So the fact that Bush is changing the primary source of intelligence in the Middle East from Israel to Saudi Arabia is profoundly important. The CIA and the State Department's Arabist had long resented counterintelligence chief James Angleton's special relationship with Israel. He also had a special relationship with the Vatican. His firing in December 1974 allowed the Operations Directorate to play for the first time an unfettered role in the Middle East operations. The covert staff had long sought to treat Saudi Arabia and other states in an even-handed manner, which Angleton never allowed because of his relationship with Israel. While Israel enjoyed a productive and relationship with both Saudi Arabia and Iran at the time, because they were supplying weapons to both of them, by the way, Near East officials in the CIA were convinced that Israel withheld huge amounts of intelligence information from the U.S. Bush's long-standing family and business relationships with the Gulf states changed things. While the switch had begun under Colby with the firing of Angleton, Bush's personal relationship with members of the Saudi family sent events into a higher gear. The consequence was to pit Israel's highly competent intelligence services against Israel's most loyal friend, the U.S. Since the Israelis now had to spy on the Americans to find out what they were doing with the Saudis. Although Bush had been given much of the responsibility for the shift. In reality, he had always been a strong supporter of Israel, despite his deep ties to Saudi Arabia through his father and grandfather. During George Bush's Zapata offshore years, which was his oil company, he had met most of the Gulf region's royal family and had developed close personal relationships with them. When Saudi's money began flowing into Texas in the 1970s, Bush and his family became very friendly, and they did. I recorded a lot of that in a book review over on Substack under the House of Saud, the House of Bush. Lots of very interesting details about that relationship. The most important friendship Bush had was with a quiet man named Sheikh Kamal Adam. And of course, we came across him when we did BCCI, everybody. He was the director of Saudi intelligence, whom Bush had met through his father. Bush has told reporters, I never met Kamal Adam personally, but that's a lie. According to lawyers for the late Saudi intelligence head, several officials at the CIA who served under Bush said that there were several meetings inside and outside the U.S., both before Bush was the DCI and while he was the DCI. Bush and Kamal were old friends. I was present when they met in New York when Bush was still the UN ambassador. Sarkis Soghanalian, Soghanalian, said. Bush and Adam shared a fascination with intelligence. Bush also took a deep interest in the Sheikh's American-educated nephew, Prince Turki bin Faisal Al Saud. Prince Turki, Turki, had been the subject of a CIA interest ever since his father sent him to a prep school called the Lawrenceville School in New Jersey. Agency talent spotters at the facility at Georgetown University kept a close track on Turki until he dropped out of Georgetown and returned home during the outbreak of the 1967 war with Israel. After later completing his education in England, Turki again returned home to prepare himself eventually to succeed his uncle, Kamal Aden, as the chief of Saudi intelligence. Now, we've got to mirror this with our other information. So we are in the 1970s, and BCCI was set up in 1972. And BCCI is the entity that was used to fund all of the drug trafficking, arms trafficking, and human trafficking that the CIA was involved in. And Kamal Adam was at the heart of all of that. Okay, so again, we're pulling in another book, the BCCI book that Warhamster and I have been going over in the series that we did on BCCI. So BCCI is set up in 1972 and by the CIA and many other intelligence entities, to include Saudi Arabia's. And so it's the mechanism of which everything that I just talked to you about is operating around. They are using BCCI to orchestrate the drug deals, the weapons deals, and all of that. So you have to keep that in the back of your mind. And also this Zapata offshore company of Bush's, remember that's the one that had the mobile oil drilling rigs out in the Gulf that was used by the CIA to ferry Cuban exiles to and train them in paramilitary operations to do shore invasions into Cuba and other Latin American countries. Yeah, same thing. Zapata Offshore was a CIA front company. Back to the book. On his visits here, Robert Crowley said, agency management made Turki welcome, knowing full well that at some point he would be their counterpart in Saudi Arabia. The young Saudi bureaucrat, Prince Turki, was cultivated by various CIA operatives, including Shackley, Clines, and Turpel. Terpil, in the early 1970s when Turpel and Wilson, Edwin Wilson, first started their operations in Libya. Turpel set Wilson up with a Geneva lawyer by the name of Robert Turrettini, Turrettini, who also handled banking matters for Turkey. Turpel told Wilson that he went back years with Turkey through his personal assistant. When Wilson needed financial backing for several of his large front companies, Prince Turkey put up the cash. In 1992, Wilson said that he shared millions of dollars with Turkey in a Swiss bank account from their operation. Both Prince Turkey and Sheikh Kamal Adam would play enormous roles in servicing the spy network designed to replace the official CIA while it was under congressional scrutiny between the time of Watergate and the end of the Carter administration. The enterprise. The idea of using the Saudi royal family to bypass congressional constitution did not originate in the kingdom. Adam was initially approached by one of the most respected, powerful men in Washington, a guy by the name of Clark Clifford. Is Warhamster still in here? I saw him earlier. Clark Clifford is the guy that is hired by BCCI to disguise the illegal purchase of 3 American banks by BCCI. So let me read that again. Adam was initially approached by one of the most respected and powerful men in Washington, Clark Clifford, who rose to power under Harry Truman and had enjoyed a relationship with the intelligence community for years. Quote, Clark Clifford approached Kamal Adam and asked that the Saudis consider setting up an informal intelligence network outside the U.S. during the investigations, Robert Crowley said. Crowley, in his role as the CIA liaison to the corporate world, was privy to the plan in which worldwide covert operations for the agency were funded through a host of Saudi banking and charity enterprises, of course, one of which is BCCI. Several top U.S. military and intelligence officials directed the operation from positions they held overseas, notably former CIA director, then Richard Helms, who at the time was the ambassador to Iran. And so you have the ambassador to Iran, who is going to be part of the intelligence network being set up outside of the CIA. Edwin Wilson and his associates supported the network. According to Wilson, Prince Turkey was used to finance several of his intelligence operations. According to Wilson, the amounts were in the millions and millions of dollars, according to Tom Clines. The relationship between the Saudis and private U.S. intelligence network grew out of the activities of Clines and his colleagues and were deemed vital. These operations were so sensitive that they could not even be revealed, said Mike Pilgrim, who played a role in the operations of the private network during the 1980s. Quote, it got to the point where we used to support the operations when the CIA could not. According to those involved, there was no line drawn between what was official and what was personal business, unquote. Prince Turkey himself acknowledged the private network for the first time in an uncharacteristically candid speech given at Georgetown University in February of 2002. I've actually read this whole speech. It's crazy. And now, this is a quote, and now I will go back to the secret that I promised to tell you. In 1976, after the Watergate matters took place, your intelligence community was literally tied up by Congress. It could not do anything. It could not send spies. It could not write reports. It could not pay money. In order to compensate for that, a group of countries got together in the hopes of fighting, quote unquote, communism and established what we called the Safari Club. The Safari Club included France, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, and Iran. The principal aim of this club was that we would share information with each other and help each other out in countering the Soviet influence worldwide, especially in Africa. Now, that's not what that club was set up to do at all, okay? The Safari Club is like the WWF. They were set up to oppress Africa. And I want to go over the names of these countries again. France, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, who has always been in the tank for part of MI6, and Iran, who at the time was in the tank with BP and Standard Oil after the overthrow of Mossadegh, right? So these are all NATO-controlled: France, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Iran, primarily, not even just NATO, primarily the UK. And all of them are under monetary duress, like leveraging with the concessions and all that other stuff to NATO countries. And they are exploited, and I'm not saying involuntarily, but they are exploiting that connection to set up a privatization of the CIA mission to get it out of the purview of Congress. And they called it the Safari Club. This is exactly what we discovered with the WWF. It's called a pattern. All right. And by the way, where did the WWF primarily operate? Africa. Ah! In the 1970s, there were still some countries in Africa that were coming out of colonialism, among them Mozambique, Angola, and Djibouti. The main concern of everyone was that the quote unquote spread of communism, because that's what we're going to use as the excuse to colonialize these countries under the disguise of it's for their own good. Congress had literally paralyzed the work not only of the U.S. intelligence community, but of the foreign services as well. No, what Congress paralyzed was your ability to overthrow governments under the guise of anti-communism. And so the kingdom, meaning Saudi Arabia, with these countries helped, I believe, this is according to this guy that the author's talking to keep the world safe at a time when the United States was not able to do that. That, I think, is the secret that many of you don't know. So this is what the prince is sharing with this audience at Georgetown. So they are telling you that they are using communism as the excuse to oppress all of Africa in order to keep it safe from quote unquote communism. They destroyed the entire continent. They destroyed it to save it. He goes on to say, I am not saying it because I look to tell secrets, but because the time has gone and many of the actors are gone as well, unquote. Turkey's secret was that the Saudi family had taken over intelligence financing for the U.S. It was, they didn't take over it. They were just part of the apparatus outside the U.S. because they're trying to make it, the guys, again, this book is written by, with information from former CIA agents. We all know because the BCCI is sitting there in plain sight at this time, right? This is the late 1970s, early 1980s. It becomes a $20 billion bank on a daily basis. It's not like they don't have money. It was during this time that the Saudis opened up a series of covert accounts at Riggs Bank in Washington, D.C. Starting in the 1970s, bank investigators say these accounts showed up with tens of millions of dollars that were being transferred between CIA operational accounts and accounts controlled by the Saudi government, as well as the Saudi U.S. the the embassy that Saudi had in Washington, D.C. Turkey worked directly with the agency's operatives like Edwin Wilson. And it says, quote, "If I needed money for an operation, Prince Turkey made it available," unquote, Wilson said. Clifford's request for Saudi help came at a very critical time for the royal family. Although the House of Saud had long placated domestic conservative clerics by allowing the education system that targeted the West, especially the US, as evil, they were still afraid of the establishment of any Muslim fundamentalists in the region. Their interest included keeping the Shah in charge of Tehran and keeping an eye on an increasingly militant Libya. And Libya at the time was not militant, by the way. Libya was leading the effort to free Africa. Saudi is operating on behalf of NATO's imperialistic endeavors in Africa, and they are willingly operating to suppress everyone in Africa. So just keep that in mind. Normally, Israeli and Saudi interests were in conflict. In this case, they actually matched up perfectly. It was in the interest of Albert Hakim, Frank Turpel's sometimes employer, to serve as a bridge between the two. Albert Hakim is spelled Hakim. So you have Sarkis Saghalyan, who was close to Sheikh Kamel Aden during this period. And again, Aden is the chief of intel for Saudi. Aden frequently asked him what kind of shape the Shah was in politically. He complained the CIA was not giving him the full picture of how the Shah was losing control of Iran. Aden believed that the binding Saudi Arabia with the U.S. would increase the House of Saud's chance of surviving an Islamic resurgence. "Believe me," the CIA agent said, "Kamal did not do these things out of charity. He did them out of survival." Aden worked closely with George Bush on a plan to provide covert banking services to the CIA. That's the BCCI, by the way. Like most things the Saudis do, there was a benefit in it for the Saudi family. The arrangements would give the Saudis a comprehensive knowledge of U.S. intelligence operations. In 1976, when the CIA needed an influx of cash for its operations, Aden agreed to allow Nugent Handbank Bernie Houghton to open a branch in Saudi Arabia. And again, we've covered Nugent Hand as well, the bank in Australia that was used for CIA money laundering as well, and weapons transactions. On the surface, the intelligence agency in Saudi Arabia was organized along the same lines as the CIA, but the hiring of case officers was very different. Part of Prince Turkey's job was to reach out to the mullahs to provide religious officers. The Turkey, perhaps the most savvy of politicians in the royal family, tried to recruit those who practiced the reform version of Islam. And from an intelligence viewpoint, bringing the extreme Wahhabis into the intelligence network would have made them loyal to the royal family and helped them ensure the survival of the state. In 1975, the royal family was approached by the Pakistani government for help in financing an Islamic nuclear weapon. Aden and his advisors had simultaneously reached the conclusion that the royal family could not survive if they let the Israeli nuclear program stand unchallenged. One of Aden's closest American advisors said, quote, "A decision was taken to pursue a two-track policy, placate religious Muslims by starting a covert effort to develop Islamic military capability, while the second policy would be to cooperate in conjunction with the U.S. on undermining extreme Islamic movements that might disrupt the Saudi family," unquote. The Saudis were adamant, however, that the funding for the Pakistani program be for research only, that no bombs be tested. Yeah, I'm sure they did. Adam understood that creating a single worldwide clandestine bank was not enough to assure the kind of resources necessary to stave off the coming Islamic revolutions that were threatening Saudi Arabia at the time. The Safari Club needed a network of banks to finance its intelligence operations. With the official blessings of George Bush as head of the CIA, Adam transformed a small Pakistani Merchant Bank, BCCI, into the worldwide money laundering machine, buying banks all around the world in order to create the biggest clandestine money laundering outfit in history. Bush had an account at BCCI, established at the time he was in the CIA. The account was set up in a Paris branch of the bank. Subsequent Senate and other investigations concluded that the CIA, beginning with Bush, had protected the bank while it took part in illicit activities. One source who investigated the bank and provided information about the Bush account in Paris was Jacques Bardu, Bardu, who, as a French customs official, raided the BCCI Paris branch and discovered the account in Bush's name. Time magazine reported that the bank had its own spies, hitmen, and enforcers. What no one reported at the time was that the bank was being used by the United States and Saudi Arabia as an intelligence front as well. There had never been anything like it. Paul Helliwell made the mold, but Adam and BCCI founder Hassan Abedi smashed it. They contrived, with Bush and other intelligence services head, a plan that seemed too good to be true. The bank would solicit the business of every major terrorist, rebel, and underground organization in the world. Because, honey, the CIA created them all. They have them on a Rolodex. The invaluable intelligence thus gained would be discreetly distributed to the friends of BCCI. Yeah. Oh, come on. They already had all that intelligence because they set up the network, guys. According to Wilson and Crowley, Bush ordered Raymond Close, Close, the CIA's top man in Saudi Arabia, to work closely with Adam. Adam had other important roles too. He arranged through DCI Bush to put Egypt's vice president Anwar Sadat on an intelligence agency payroll for the first time. This made Adam, in effect, Sadat's case officer. This relationship gave Adam leverage when the time came to persuade Sadat to sign the Camp David Accords. Aden and Abedi believed the U.S. needed monitoring after Aden left the Intelligence Directorate in 1977. He and Abedi, using Clark Clifford, began infiltrating the American banking system. Because Adam, through his relationships with Shackley and Bush, had intimate knowledge on just how desperate the U.S. intelligence was for services, a convenient Washington, D.C. based bank acquiring one became one of his main goals. Meanwhile, as Clifford was making the connection between the CIA and Adam, he was also calling on Attorney General Edward Levi to kill the probe, which would have been investigating Helms' line to the Senate about the CIA's involvement in the coup in Chile. It was threatening the future of both Shackley and Helms and would have also exposed the Safari Club. Adam did not rely simply on money to carry out the plan. Adam and Abedi understood that they would also need muscle. They tapped into the CIA's stockpile of malcontents and created a 1,500 strong group of assassins and enforcers. That sounds like a Gladio network. They referred to it as the Black Network. It combined intelligence with an effort to control large portions of the world's economy. There were those in the CIA who fretted over Bush's proximity to Shackley and over his relationship with Jennifer Fitzgerald, who was serving as his quote-unquote personal aide. One of those was the late executive director of the CIA, Benjamin Evans. Benjamin Evans was a highly disciplined West Point graduate who was a about as traditional as they come. Because of his job, his contact with Bush was frequent and personal. Evans told colleagues inside and outside the agency that he thought Bush was a terrible, had taken a terrible chance by exposing himself to compromise. Others also worried about Fitzgerald's history, specifically about her father. According to William Corson, Peter Fitzgerald had been, quote, one of British intelligence most important and classified units. Further, he never returned to England after World War II. One of the worries some of the counterintelligence people had was that Jennifer might be spying on Bush for the British, unquote. Despite Evans' problems with Shackley and Fitzgerald, his friendship with Bush was genuine. When Bush needed big favors, especially 10 years later when he was running the Iran-Contra operation for Ronald Reagan, he turned to Evans. For example, Evans helped persuade the Indiana freshman Senator Danford Quayle to provide cover for his Senate office for some covert operations. Evans' nephew, Daniel Evans, had coincidentally been a longtime Quayle supporter and fundraiser as well. What a small network of corrupt people. So there you have it. The next segment is going to talk about Stanford Turner's oversight at the CIA after Bush leaves. So lots of information in that part there. But again, the amazing thing to me is how this dovetails with all of the other stuff that we've already disclosed, all of the BCCI, the Nugent Hand. You guys can see how each one of these books takes all of the information that we have previously learned and adds a few new nuggets. And it is through this constant pursuit of the entire picture that eventually we will have the entire picture. Just takes a lot of time and a lot of remembering of people, which again is why eventually I'll get the database set up with all of the people and their connections. So let's open it up. Anybody have anything that they want to add? Trump Frog, how you doing? Stellar. I guess we lost Bridget. She said her internet went down.
It's crazy stuff. Yeah, no, it's doing great. Been a crazy weekend. I really can't stand the international syndicate more than I couldn't stand it before. So that part is growing.
It is quite amazing. That tonight's going to blow your mind. But
oh my. Okay, I can't wait. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it'll blow your mind. Carrie, go ahead.
Yeah, I sent you something about bioweapons, a video, and this guy was saying that the main bioweapons guy that created Lyme disease was a Russia double agent. And when he said it, I was like, no, he wasn't. But it'd be great if you could look at that.
Okay, thanks for
to correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
So the other thing is, Muhammad, that wrote the Quran, his enemy was the House of Saud, which is very, very old. And his big thing, he worked on the Silk Road. Remember, I lived in the region, so this is where I get my information. But it can be like you can look it up and it's qualified. Anyway, sorry, I was in the garden. He had like physical battles with them. They were his enemy. He understood the economics of what they were doing, how they were fucking the people. And there's a whole big thing around that. But Muslims, real Muslims, don't align with usury. Like, that is like the worst thing you could do. It's haram, haram. And, you know, they're running a program now. And I'm not going to bring them into it, but yeah, the Saudis are definitely rich people that are the enemy of the people.
Okay. Guru, go ahead. Guru?
What's up, Guru?
He's got his hand.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
What's up, guys? How you going?
Take up it.
All right, we hear you now.
Sorry, I'm actually laying under my boat, guys. I'm doing some extensions, but I'm just listening to you guys, which what a way to start your morning. But yeah, I'm wondering how you spell that Graham you were talking about. I might have to do some research here, Colonel.
It's Graham.
I was wishing you wasn't going to say that. You know that, don't you? My name's Dave Graham. Through the tree.
Yeah, well, you know, he's part of the military, so I wish I wasn't saying it too.
No, I'm going to do a bit of digging, actually, Colonel. If I'll get down exactly who he is, and then I'll go and have a bit of a look. But yeah,
Awesome.
hopefully I have any threats in my family.
Yeah, it's crazy how interwoven our senior military has been in this intelligence operation. It's blah. It's so disgusting to me. Yeah, I hate it. Carrie, did you have something else?
Yeah, Stellar knows a lot about the Las Vegas shooting, possible attempted assassination of the Saudi prince. I would love more information on that if she could
Golfing.
give it
Golfing. I just saw that Trump's plane was in town. Golfing knows all the ins and outs with that because of Mindy Robinson. If you want to know a lot of stuff, there's a video.
Even before her, but watch the Mindy Robinson video. They do a good job of spelling that out. But what do you want to know, Karen?
I just don't understand what happened. It's like, how is it that Trump was there and knew or something? I just don't get it. It's so, it blows my mind. Like Stellar says, it just completely blows my mind.
Yeah, you can look up the Route 91 video with Mindy Robinson. She does a good job. The police scanners tell the story. But you can also research it.
Can you post it in the pill?
I'm working. I'm just trying to answer your question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You can find it on Rumble.
From my understanding, too, I'll look for it and then send it over to you. But from my understanding, there was intel where maybe in a very short amount of time, and from my understanding, Trump was here and saved his life, or his, but his plane was here. So whether he was with him or not, I don't know. But Air Force One was here, or a plane that looked just like it.
Yeah, Mohammed bin Salman was videoed in the Tropicana Hotel, being walked out of the hotel with gunfire everywhere, surrounded by mercs, because all 13 MGM Grand hotels had shootings at the same time.
And there's videos of very, very black helicopters flying between like Mandalay Bay and where the shooting was. And the Tropicana where he was at, that he was just talking about, that has been imploded. So there is nothing left anymore. It's just a flat thing.
Funny how that happens.
Exactly.
Get rid of the evidence.
And so a month later, all the Saudi royal princes were arrested and held in a Ritz-Carlton 5-diamond hotel and were shook down. Mohammed Ali bin Talal had to pay $6 billion to be freed.
And what and wasn't there a training exercise going on out there?
You know, that part I don't know.
There was.
We've been to all on the top 4 floors.
I
Along
know.
with Bill Gates at the Mandalay Bay.
But there's a military location that was nearby that they were doing quote unquote training exercises with helicopters. That
They
was
do that quite a bit here, yeah. And
that
they
was the
probably had it blocked
justification.
off, yeah.
Yes, that was the justification for having the helicopters in the air that night.
Oh my gosh, now that you're bringing that up, okay, so about a month ago or so, I was doing a wedding on the Strip, and it was very unusual, but they had helicopters again. These were not blacked out. They had helicopters that were flying, and I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't ever really seen that. And Trey, who was doing a wedding they had just finished the wedding over at the Bellagio, and he just as he's leaving town or taking the couple back to their hotel is when all hell broke loose, if you want to say. He told me, he goes, oh no, there was one other time it was like that. He goes, it was a few years ago. It was in the fall. And I go, around October? He goes, yeah. And then I chuckled inside. So yes, there was something that was going on, and he does remember helicopters there.
Yeah.
That is not something that's normal, that you have helicopters down low enough. Does that make sense?
Correct. Yes. And that was a training exercise out of that location. And I believe that location is like in the northwest corner of Arizona. It's like a base, like a guard base or something like that, that foreign nationals come in to do training exercises there. Quote
What
unquote.
was the name of the training exercise, Colonel? Do they
I don't.
name them?
I don't know. Normally they do have names, but I don't remember the training name of it.
What you may want to do is like, not Google, but maybe like in Brave or something like that, and see if you can find out, like when they had their helicopter trainings back in 2017. Sometimes you might, if they don't scrub that part of the internet, sometimes you can find them. Usually, I don't know if they can go that far back, but sometimes they do, especially if you go in those, the ones that shows the airplanes on the computer. I don't know if they're called.
Yeah, and Yandex is probably the best one to look for that, because they have stuff that's scrubbed off of everybody else's websites.
Thanks, guys. It's really confusing.
Yeah. Anyway, anybody else?
Wasn't there someone from the royal family who did get executed because of stuff? There was one of the princes, I thought, that, or a few of them, not only just with the fines, but I thought there was one that was executed.
And a helicopter was blown up in Saudi Arabia after that.
Okay, then he was the really, really evil one who was like literally obsessed with it, with all that crazy stuff, bad stuff.
Well, Alawi bin Talal, which was the guy who picked Obama's cabinet, who was the largest owner of Twitter and Citibank and those things, it was a fight between him and Mohammed bin Salman. And apparently we know who won. So
he got accidented as opposed to suicided.
Yes, but it wasn't him. He's still alive.
Oh, wasn't there who was the one who died in the helicopter? The one that died in the helicopter was supposed to be really
an uncle or somebody, and I think he was the one who was tied to Khashoggi. I'll have to look into that.
Okay, yeah, I believe, and he was really, 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 well, so was the one son, but that one especially, from my understanding as well.
All right, Miles, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever find out the exact truth about what happened in Vegas. I mean, I wish we would, because of the enormity of it. But people have done a lot of investigation on that. You probably know that, Colonel. And some people, they disappeared or got suicided. And I hope Trump does address it at some point, because of the loss of life. And it was a huge operation. And if you think about Vegas, I mean, what city in the world has more cameras, security cameras, than Vegas? So somebody knows everything that happened there.
So just to be very clear, we cannot move on from this without knowing the truth. If we are ever going to have faith restored into our government, we have to have a government that tells people the truth, whether they are ready to hear it or not. I don't give a shit. We can't move on in truth, in light, without the truth. We can't. And so we collectively have to demand the truth because we're not moving on without it. We don't have a republic if we don't have truth. We don't have informed consent if we have no fucking information. So all of the information has to be made available to us, and the cards fall where they may. That's an absolute as far as I'm concerned. Stellar, go ahead.
Well, the Vegas one, we have to know what happened because there's so many other false flags that happened because of that. You know, whether it was in California when they shot up in Ventura County, and there were a lot of people that were at the Route 91 that were also witnesses that were, off, if you want to say, and some other places, because like if you follow the survivors, especially the one, follow these different funky things that go on, or abnormal deaths and stuff like that, especially music stuff, you're going to find tie-ins with Las Vegas, and especially with people that were there. And it's like, oh my gosh, there was, because even like the Route 91, there were people there was another shooting incident somewhere else. It was a smaller incident one. And then there was Vegas. And then there was at least one or two. I think there was another one in Florida. And then I definitely know the one in Ventura, because at one time before I purged that whole Facebook account, because I was never allowed to post on it, I could only look. I was in the group with a whole bunch of Route 91 people because I had a lot of friends that worked and survived it and witnesses. So they had it, it was quite a few. So people they kept in touch really, really well and stuff. And you would hear like, oh my gosh, so-and-so and so-and-so, they were here, da-da-da-da-da. And you would hear about these deaths. And then that shooting that happened in some bar in Ventura County. And then, so that it was just very, very strange. And then when I got out of the group, I didn't really pay much attention. And I didn't think of Operation Gladio because I knew nothing about this, because this is back in 2017. So I got off of Facebook altogether that one time back in 2021, just because for 2 years I could only, post for like 10 days. It was really bad. They purged me bad.
Miles, go ahead.
Colonel, I agree with you 100%, but you know that national security issues come up, especially international, and things are going to be classified for years. I mean, we still don't know about JFK.
Nope.
And I'm 70 years old. And,
nope.
I was like, I was in third grade when it happened. So I get what you're talking about. But, we've been following this stuff way before I ever met you. And we were like, okay, there was this guy named McAfee. We don't know what happened to him. And then right after that, there's like a sinkhole on Miami Beach. And a building comes down. Like, I was born in Miami Beach. That doesn't happen down there. You know that. They don't build.
So I'm just telling you, I know, I'm telling you that any attempt to use the term national security to keep information from the population that exposes this network that we're exposing is unacceptable. And I'm not moving on. I hope everyone here is going to be part of the demand for 100% reckoning with the truth. Because the entire premise and the overwhelming support of President Trump is to defeat this international syndicate. And as you guys have heard, like especially with the spaces that we did with Mr. Truth Bomb, our electing Trump has started a wave around the world. And the only way that we benefit from that wave is if it washes away all of the lies and these covert networks, and it exposes the truth so that we can all collectively support our governments again. It's just like COVID erased all faith in the medical establishment around the world. It's gone. No one, except for idiots, trust the medical establishment, nor will they ever. The same is true about the international syndicate and their hold on and all of these false flags. Until all of it is exposed and all of it's been accounted for and people have been held responsible, we will never have faith in our government again. And I don't know about you guys, but you can't have a military if you don't have faith in your government, because who's going to sacrifice their son to Baal in charge of our fucking military? I'm not. I just had somebody on the phone today talking to me about their son joining the military, and I told him absolutely not. I don't give a shit if Trump's president or not. Until we get full accountability of what these assholes are doing and they're stop paying people to cut off their dicks and pretend like they're women in our military, do not ever allow the government to take your child. It's like dropping your 2-year-old off on the corner and saying, okay, world, here he is. That's what you're doing when you give your children to the current military infrastructure. They have done nothing for the last 70 years but sacrifice our men and women of the military on every field around the world for opium, human trafficking, and weapons trafficking, and trillions of dollars of profit. There's no fucking way that we're ever going to support our government again and them doing that without a full accountability of what has gone on and what they've done to fix it. I'm not moving on. Kelly, go ahead.
I was going to echo what you're saying. I love what you're saying, and I'm grateful that Trump is considering.
You're banding real bad, Kelly. Stellar, you want to take her down and bring her back up so we can hear her a little better? I'll go back to Carrie and then Miles, and then we'll go back to Stellar.
I forget what I was going to say. Sorry, I'm gardening. I'll come back up.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's fine. Miles, go ahead.
Yeah, Rambo. You met Rambo at GART, right?
I did. Well, technically, I did not meet him. I saw him there.
Oh, okay. So he had a show, and he had Sheriff Mack on today. You guys might want to go watch that. That was a good one because Patrick Gunnels was with him. But Sheriff Mack's story, he told a really good story about a long time ago. He stopped this woman. She had a car full of kids, and she, was trying to control them, and she, went through a stop sign, and he pulls her over, and he was just like, he was kind of struggling, he said back then, and he just got a message from God. He's like, what are you doing? Why are you writing this woman a ticket? And he's going, like, what? And he said it changed his life, that he had to think about things a little more about this woman couldn't afford the ticket. It was like a $30 ticket back in the 80s. But, he just thought about it, really heavy. and he wished that he'd see this woman again because she changed his life, and she doesn't even know it. And if you follow Sheriff Mack, he's got a good organization, but yeah, things have to change with us before how we think and how we deal with our fellow man. But you might want to watch that show. Even Rambo was touched, and Rambo's not an angel. Well, he is. He's getting better. Let's put it that way. But his life story is just, a very strange one too.
Yeah.
So I get it, Colonel. A lot of things are changing for the better, and but it's not going to happen overnight. We know that. Thanks, Colonel.
Sure. Kelly, go ahead.
Hey, hopefully you can hear me a little bit better.
Yep, I can hear you fine.
So yeah, like the previous speaker was saying, yeah, it's definitely not going to change overnight, but I am certainly thankful that Trump is considering, and I use that word somewhat ironically since we know it will happen, but he's going to have the removal of transformers from being able to enlist and be in the military. So that's going to be great because that needs to happen. That's an absolute mental illness. And then the facilitation of that procedure or those procedures being done at the behest of the United States government and being funded by the U.S. taxpayer is going to stop. So there's that. And then there was another thing that you were talking about. I can't remember what the other facet was that I had a comment on, but my brain, my brain train ran into a cow. So I'm going to have to think about that for a second.
So,
yeah, it was Transformers and something else.
So let's talk about the Transformers for a second. If you guys read my post earlier today, I did have somebody reach out to me, which this has been a topic of conversation. I just had a friend of mine leave the Air Force recruiting agency to go to Group Command just here recently. And I chatted with him as well about what the thing, if you've never been in the military, and even if you've been in the military and it's been a long time ago, may not dawn on you that these people that come into the military and decide that they want to declare themselves literally mentally ill, because this condition has a Medicare code of mental illness. Now, if you understand how the military operates, you are not allowed to be in the military if you're mentally ill. You are sent for evaluation and you are discharged. If you have a condition that cannot be resolved, this is a condition that cannot be resolved, you would be discharged. We're not paying for it. Would be like sending someone that's in the military to inpatient psychological rehabilitation. That does not happen ever, except now with people who have a psychological disorder that has decided they want to be someone of the opposite sex. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is many of these people, according to a source of mine who doesn't want to be known, said that the recruiters know about this as they're being recruited into the system. They make it very well known that that's the reason why they're coming in. Okay. I cannot enlist someone into the United States military that has ever taken ADHD. It's a disqualifying factor. So many of the conditions that people have in childhood are medically disqualifying to be in the military. This is someone that is coming into a recruiter's office self-confessing a mental disorder, and the recruiter is recruiting them, and then the American taxpayer is paying for basically the quote unquote rehab of a mentally ill person that should have never been in the military to begin with. But even if not all of that was bad enough, and it's all bad enough, the person, once they're on active duty, this process is ongoing, and the medical status of the person almost immediately upon entering the United States military is in a medical deferment, undergoing treatment, which means number one, they will call in sick almost every day. They have medical appointments, multiple ones throughout the week for months, if not years on end. They undergo medical drugs that are not available forward deployed. So if your unit deploys, this asshole's not going. This asshole's going to sit at home, and someone else who went on the deployment last time is going to have to go this time too, because you have to go with a full contingent. And so someone is making up the slack of this asshole sitting in a position that's deployable, and his ass ain't going anywhere. So you have not only became a daily liability to your unit, you aren't medically qualified to do your fucking job and deploy to do it. And as such, the people in the unit despise the person, not because they give a shit about who he sleeps with or his psychiatric illness. They despise him because the esprit de corps of military units is that you're a team and you all help each other out. This jackwad ain't helping anybody else out. He has now become a detriment to the unit and the morale in the unit. And I'm going to talk from a commanding officer's perspective. If, as a commanding officer, I am required to not call that asshole out and to not make an example of this person that is not even qualified to be in the military, that's sitting here in a position, do you understand what that does to my credibility as a commanding officer? That I'm supposed to just be silent and not tell everybody else. So I've got 99 people in a unit of 100 that's medically qualified, does their PT shit, busts their ass, deploys on rotation, and I got one person sitting here that ain't doing jack shit. And as a commanding officer, that one person is visible to everyone. Everyone knows about it. You're not allowed to talk about it because the asshole's going to go scream to the EEO office that you're discriminating against them. So they're just there. And I have now, as a senior officer, a commanding officer, I have zero credibility with the other 99 because I'm allowing it all to happen. I'm not standing up, throwing my rank on a table and saying, fuck you all. I'm not doing this. I'm not playing in your charade. I'm not going to pretend like this asshole's a woman when it's a man, especially as another female officer. That's what they've done to the internal of our military. They've destroyed it. They destroyed all of the integrity of the officer corps with this bullshit DEI. I don't think anybody understands how bad our fucking military is right now and the destruction that they have done, because it's not just that person. It's every person in the chain of command that is condoning it now looks like an idiot to the rest of the unit. I can't get even... I can't even get close to explaining this to you, because my experience, even with the one person that, like, I had a person in my last assignment that had probably been passed around to 4 or 5 different assignments, grossly overweight, and no one, I mean, the person had like 12 years in the service, and no one had ever sat down with this person and said, look, chick, this ain't happening. Not under my command. You are either going to get your weight under control or I'm discharging you. I had someone that was an amazing person. You guys saw me interview him, Justin Ivy, that I put in charge of my fitness program. And I prayed every night that we could get this person physically fit to be able to pass the fitness test and get underweight. We did, and I did not have to discharge her. I would have, because I cannot tolerate substandard performance because it destroys the morale of your entire unit. When I was in Italy, I had a girl, again, another one. She was a staff sergeant. This girl was never making tech sergeant. I'm just going to tell you that she didn't have the mental capacity to be able to do that, like intellectually, not like a mental patient or something. But she was on her third assignment, and she was totally inept at whatever job. I gave her 2 different jobs. She couldn't do either job. I started documenting the fact that she was not performing up to standards. She was a minority. And as such, I worked for a minority commander, and I went through hell discharging this person because my boss, not the girl that I was discharging because she couldn't do her job, my boss was the one that was telling me that I was racist because I was discharging someone that couldn't do their job. And it didn't matter. I wasn't going to not do it. And it's a long story, but eventually I had several other people that were in the unit that worked for me, that because my boss was where I caught the grief at. Anyway, there's just so much to the internal workings of the military that if you've never been in the military, most people don't understand. Your life depends on the morale and welfare of your unit. And that has been destroyed. The culture that has been created in our military has destroyed the cohesiveness of our military. And that directly impacts. And this is one of the issues that just has to be dealt with. Kelly, go ahead.
All right, thanks. Sorry, my dad saw me pulled over on the side of the road and he was like, "What are you doing?" Anyway, so back to what you were saying about the Transformers and all of that. So would it be correct, ladies, get buckled up,
Wouldn't it be a more appropriate term would be Decepticon?
To say that after the psych evaluation, the government's seeking essentially a resolution to that quote unquote mental illness, and that would be their justification then for, not just financing, but also profiting off of the transition of military members?
So if you have a diagnosed psychological condition, you are medical boarded and you are separated from the military. You're not allowed to be on active duty if you have a mental illness, period.
Right. And so now that this isn't necessary, now that being a Transformer isn't considered that currently anyway.
But it is. It still is. They're just ignoring that.
Oh, you and I have very similar thoughts on that. Yeah, it absolutely is. I'm just wondering how they're getting away with justifying it and allowing it to happen. But and then the other thing I was going to say is that Trump is he's going to go back to making the COVID vaccinations optional and giving back pay and trying to get the other military members that were dismissed or otherwise are no longer serving back into the military. That was the other thing I was going to say. Yeah,
and so the pay, the back pay, and all of that other stuff. So it has never not been a mental illness. The way they do this is, for example, when the military decided, with all of the medical research and all the other stuff, that ADHD medication was a disqualifying factor for you to join the military, there was a decision made to state that. So over the course of time, drug use is another great example. When I first joined the military in 1979, if you were caught with any kind of drugs, and I do mean any kind of drugs, it was immediate, you're out the door. There was no rehab program. There was nothing. You're gone. Alcohol was treated a little differently. There was a rehabilitation program, blah, blah, blah. And those types of things have changed over the course of time, where then drugs became, if you get caught with this drug versus this drug, there could be it's basically a commander discretion. It can be rehabilitation. You can be sent to this, whatever. So recently, the cross-dressing in the United States military would have been viewed as a compromising, from a security perspective, disqualifier for military service. And so someone literally decided that one mental illness condition is going to be tolerated. And since it's tolerated, all of the corresponding medical infrastructure that is needed in order to facilitate that medical condition or that mental condition is going to be added and paid for by the taxpayer. And so it would be like saying that if we took a schizophrenic person and we decided all of a sudden that schizophrenia is this acceptable condition now that we are going to embrace and love inside the military, and it requires you to be in a padded cell for 29 out of 30 days a month. And we decided that we're going to build padded cells all over the military to house this person in the confinement facilities because they're stark raving mad. And then we turned around to the taxpayers and said, yeah, we've changed our mind that schizophrenia is okay in the military. Yeah, we're going to train them how to shoot a gun and blow shit up. And yeah, they have to be in a padded cell, but don't you worry, we're going to create the padded cell too. That's literally what our government officials has done on this particular issue. Miles, go ahead.
We talked about this a long time ago. This syndicate, you can't give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And, we have learned how they've been using their propaganda against us. Just think about a very popular TV show that, it was called Match. Well, isn't that cute that somebody likes to cross-dress in Korea? So they've been doing this forever in Hollywood to try to subvert their agenda in our minds. Just think about I took a biology course. No, it's called sex education now. And no, that's good. We'll tell your kid how to have sex and when to have sex. None of this stuff should have been allowed a long time ago.
That's absolutely true. Carrie, go ahead.
Sorry.
For the record, Transformers is a great name, but it's probably more appropriate to call them Decepticons.
Yes, Decepticons better. You stated within your reading that one of the people gave the excuse that all those people are dead now, so I can talk about it. What the fuck is this excuse that they spit out all the time? Why is that acceptable? I really don't comprehend how they get away with making that as some barrier.
Well, I mean, you're right. I'll just cede that point because first of all, go back to when supposedly they created the law that says you can't out CIA operatives. And then, of course, what did they need to have happen in order to pass that law? They killed one of their own officers. So in the middle of the congressional investigation into the CIA wrongdoing, they off one of their own officers in Greece and then use that as the excuse to ram through a law that says, it's illegal to be able to identify CIA agents. Well, I've got a news flash for you. If CIA agents are doing illegal shit, I don't give a shit. I don't care. You should have thought about that before you started doing illegal shit, like participating in death squads and tracking people down all over the world to assassinate them. So if that's what you chose to do, bad on you. And then it, just like Miles was just saying, put your toe in the door and then push the door open as fast as you can. So their toe in the door was assassinating one of their own agents in order to bully the Congress into dropping their investigation into the CIA, and on top of that, passing a law saying you can't ID CIA agents. So then on top of that, they add, well, you'll never be able to disclose any of the classified information that we classified, not because it was actually classified information, but because it makes us look like assassins and illegal bullshit operations, then we put the icing on the cake and say, well, if any of them are still alive, we can't expose any of this information. And long after everyone is dead, they still are going to come up with the next reason why we can't see anything, while at the same time, they're trying to convince us we live in a republic and we have an informed vote. You don't get to have it both ways. Avelle, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Colonel, and everyone in the space. What a great space. I wanted to discuss this issue of the transsexuals in the military under the idea of mental illness. I think that is the problem, is the diagnosis has been changed in the International Code of Diseases by the WHO. And now gender incongruence is what it's called. And so the medical community doesn't think of this as a mental disorder. They call it gender incongruence. So I think this could be the basis of why it's allowed. I don't know the military standards on those things, but I see that as one of the biggest things our society has to do is change the way the medical community thinks of this, what they now call a condition. It's called a, let me see where it's listed. It's listed only as a condition related to sexual health.
So here's the problem with that. Yeah, here's the problem with that. As I have said repeatedly, both in post and verbally, in an information war, in 5th generation warfare, language is everything. And anyone who talks about, and I've had several people go, oh, who cares? Well, I care. Language is everything in information warfare. And we are in a war to ensure that our culture and our country survive. The co-opting of language, as you just articulated, doesn't change the basic facts. Anybody walking around in society who is a male and they're pretending, they're delusional to the point where they dress and act like a woman is a mental disorder. The fact that some arbitrary organization that was set up as part of this overall international syndicate to destroy humanity, called the WHO, decided to co-opt language and change the definition. It would be the same thing as the WHO telling us that they're now in charge of all pandemic responses in the United States. The only thing I have to say is fuck off. I don't care. You are not in control of the United States. I don't have to abide by your bullshit redefining a mental disorder. And you're absolutely right that this is an overarching effort. So let me just, the best example of this, guys, is fluoride. So back in the day, in the 1930s, when they decided industrialists were going to poison all of our water with fluoride, so because it's a poison that they had to dispose of as a hazardous waste, and they didn't want to spend that money, so they just decided to sell it, and they were going to distribute all of the shit to the water companies. The government was going to buy all of the hazardous waste with our tax dollars. So what they did is they basically covertly funded certain colleges like the Carnegie School, because Carnegie actually produced the byproduct of fluoride, and Kaiser, who was in the aluminum business, who produced the byproduct of fluoride too in the aluminum processing, all funded universities to do quote unquote studies that all decided that fluoride was fine. And this is like, who funds the WHO? The same syndicate that is trying to destroy the United States military. And so if I have the same syndicate behind the scenes that created the thing called the WHO, and then the WHO is the one that's writing all of this bullshit, and then these people that are trying to destroy the US military goes, oh my God, look what the WHO just did. They wrote this thing, and we're going to adopt this thing that they wrote, and we're going to change all the definitions based on that. It doesn't change the fact that anybody who's delusional enough to think that they are a different sex and cross dresses to that extent has a mental illness. Period. That's the way it is. Stellar, go ahead.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of this stuff is going to come out. I mean, whether it's the Vegas shootings, because all this stuff all ties down to the international syndicate. It all comes down to Gladio, just like, I think Miles mentioned, like with Kennedy, the reason why everything's all classified, redacted, and all that other stuff is they don't want the public to know because they're freaking guilty. But that does have to come out for the reasons that you said, because the U.S. military are the children of Americans. The woke agenda is just, okay, just like I told other people, there are only two sexes. If you were born with an XY, you're a boy. And if you were born with an XX, you're a girl. It doesn't matter if you cut off your ding-a-ling and turn it into a vajayjay. You're still a boy because your chromosomes can't change. And these people are so into freaking science. It's science too. So I was just going to leave it at that. And then the other thing with the exposure of, what's going on with the elections, for us to also be able to trust our government, we also have to be able to trust our election systems. And I do feel, excuse me, that all that stuff will be, we'll have that all cleaned out and cleaned up and things like that. Maybe I'm being a hopium, but they will be. And once we get that kind of control as well, then we get the people that are representing us. And I think that all the baddies in the Operation Gladio people that have been doing all these stupid things from all over, it's going to make a big difference, because if we're cleaning out our backyard, like you said, putting that template together, and when these elections get turned over, and the reason, or at least showing the exposure, and I do feel that they will be taken care of that way as well. But, if it shows that, if the world sees that, even in the United States, oh, they're on the Dominion, they're on, all those Smartmatic or whatever the other ones are, we have the same systems here. They're going to question the systems that they have and find out that their government is all put in just like ours was. So it's going to be a huge, big ripple effect, in my personal opinion.
I agree. And I would just say one thing about your comment about science. They are not all about science. So they're all about claiming they're all about science. But their science, yeah.
That was how they were getting everybody to take the jab.
Yes.
Well, don't you trust the science?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's why I used
Correct.
that. I thought that was their mantra.
Yeah, it is, Seller, but I just want to make sure that people understand. That's like calling death squads anti-communist. They call things science, but it's not actual science. It's like the climate bullshit is all based on quote unquote science, none of which is scientifically proven. It's all bullshit. The COVID hysteria was.
If they say science, that's their code word.
Yes.
Propaganda.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. Thank you. Let's see. Stony, go ahead.
Hi guys, love this space. Great topic today.
Thank you.
So specifically, I would like to ask Aval. Aval, I love when you speak. I know you do a ton of research, way more than I do. But I do coding for a living, and I'm looking at the WHO codes now, and I don't see that gender incongruence. So I was wanting to request where you got that information with respect.
Hi, is it Stony speaking?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, Val.
I only have DSM books with me. I don't have the ICD, so I looked that up online. So that I could have that wrong. But here in America, people use mostly the DSM codes, which should be put out by the American Psychiatric Society. And the problem with that is it's been changed to gender dysphoria. So it's a quite similar problem. So whether or not it's actually considered a mental illness is what I think is an ideological problem right now. And within the community, just people like nurses, social workers, they don't consider this a mental illness.
You are correct. They do not. Here owns a counseling business, and I used to run her office, and they do not consider it well, it is classified by the WHO as a mental illness. And just so everybody knows, the DSM codes are used by the social workers, licensed professional counselors, and psychiatry and psychology, and those are all of the F codes. So I'm looking here because I work with this open all day. I don't see that term of gender incongruence. I do see gender identity disorder unspecified, other gender identity disorders, gender identity disorder of a childhood, transsexualism, and then I see indeterminate sex, unspecified.
So let me, Stoney,
Those
let
are
me.
the codes that I see, and I'm not challenging you. I just don't. I'm just trying to offer the
No, but Stoney,
information as I know as a coder.
Stoney, you bring up the perfect dilemma here, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
What you just highlighted is a couple of things. So let me tell you what my takeaway is as a commander. My takeaway is that the refusal of people, quote unquote, in the system to diagnose something as a mental illness that has mental illness codes in the system tells me that they have been propagandized, bullied into the position that they will not do that. And the very point of you being able to be propagandized and bullied into a position on how mental illness is viewed tells me there's not a fucking thing about it that's scientific. Not one thing. So you just blew the entire thing out of the water. So thank you very much for doing that. And I also want to say that in normal everyday life, if you, as an adult, have a friend who every time you went over to your friend's house, they are consistently talking to an invisible person, and they insist that you talk to their invisible friend, would you ever go over to their house again? And do you need a code in a system to tell you that they're off their rocker, that they obviously have a mental illness? I don't need a code to tell me that an adult talking to an invisible person that's their best friend is not psychologically messed up. So that's just like today, in today's world. They want us to believe that we have to hang our hat on a medical code, or that they collectively have to all agree on something that you and I both look at and go, what the hell? What the hell? You don't get just get to put on a dress and mandate the rest of us all play along. And that goes back to my position that I was just talking about as a commander in the military. They are demanding that that military commander play along with the delusion that that person is qualified for military service, and that the person is not going to be in the unit for 90% of the time. They will never be deployed. They don't qualify in any measurable way that you and I would have to prove that we qualify for to be in that unit. And they are demanding that the commander play along to the disbelief of everybody else in that unit. thank you, Stony, for doing that. Wixell, go ahead.
Hey, Colonel, thanks for the space. I used to, when I was in the Marine Corps, the circles I was in were pretty friendly with Bill Lind. And he was talking about cultural Marxism even back in the 90s, but it was a subject that would often be brought up when he would stop by our office. And I'm just curious, when you have a sense, or when did you get a sense that this was an overarching agenda that would be coming at us in the future?
Oh gosh. I can't honestly say that I ever envisioned the military leadership curling up in a ball when the transgender issue came up. I can't say that there's no way anybody, I worked for some people that showed they had basically no integrity at all. I don't know of a single officer that I ever worked for that would have put up with what's going on in our military today. They're obviously all off of active duty at this point. So again, I saw the transition from the no gays allowed in the military at all to don't ask, don't tell under the Clinton administration. The rest of that, I retired in 2008. The rest of that came after. And in many respects, I'm glad it did because I would have been one of the people that did like Lohmeyer did. I would have put my rank on the table and walked out. There's no way, given all of the challenges that I had over the 22 years that I was a military officer and in charge of enlisted people, that I would ever compromise my integrity and put up with what's going on right now. Just the equality of both opportunity and hardships on deployment rotations would have been enough for me to make a stand. And I would have been one of those people in the news that put the rank on the table and walked out. I would have done that. Because I spent every day, even not to bore you guys, but as a commander, there is almost a weekly, if not monthly, challenge that you're going to face, whether it's duress from a commanding officer because of somebody working for you that is related to so-and-so and they want you to do such and such. I mean, I don't know if I've ever told you guys the story about the pressure or the request I got from my boss to publish orders on Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham was, if you're in the reserve and you get elected to public office, there's a particular section of the reserve that's called the participating, it's the PIRR. That area allows you to participate for points only so you can continue to get good years towards your retirement, but you can't get paid. So if you're a federal officer, like a congressional person or whatever, and Secret Service, this is the same thing for them, that you do duty, but you don't get paid for it because it's against the law to draw 2 federal paychecks. And so Lindsey Graham got a hair up his ass at the during the second Iraq War, and he wanted, as a JAG officer, which is what he was in the Air Force Reserve, he wanted to go into the war theater with his military uniform on, which is strictly prohibited for the PIRR people. Because number one, you're not allowed to be on active duty orders. And the only way you're allowed to be in a war zone is on active duty orders. So you're not allowed to publish the orders. So he was actually in the section that fell under my command. And my boss was a 3-star. His exec was my best friend. And I got a phone call asking me to publish these orders, or that he had requested to be on these orders, and whether or not I could do that. So I did all of the research. I'm one of those people, as you guys well know, I do my research. I knew all of these laws inside and out. I told her on the phone when she called, there's no way in hell he can do that. I will get you the references. There's no way in hell he can do that. So you need to prepare the 3-star to let him know that he's going to have to tell him no. So I go home. I take all of the books. I go online. I start doing the research. I do a little short point paper. I emailed it to her in the morning. I think the issue's dead. He can't do it. And I get a phone call that afternoon. And she says, well, their office is pushing back. And I said, okay, it doesn't matter. He can't go. I'm not publishing the orders. And because that section reports through my office, no one else is authorized to publish orders on him. And so I told her, I said, did you call the Department of Defense and ask them? I mean, it's a law. You're not allowed to do it. And they said, well, what if he doesn't ever, if you put him on annual tour? I said, he's not allowed to be in a hostile fire pay on annual tour. He has to be on active duty orders. Well, what if he doesn't ever file the travel voucher to get paid? I said, he's authorized the pay. You're not allowed to publish orders that authorizes a second paycheck. That's what the law actually says. Tell them to change the fucking law. I'm not publishing the orders. So 4 days go by, and on a personal phone call, her and I are talking over the weekend, and I said, so whatever happened with Graham? And she goes, oh, he got so-and-so to publish the orders. And I'm like, what? Yeah, he's going to the AOR, and he's going in uniform. And he did. And another colonel published those orders with no authority to publish the orders at all. And my boss was pissed at me for not doing it. So I have been put in those positions. That was not the first time. It wasn't the last time. I was put in repeatedly in positions like that, where these people in the senior officer rank, he was a 3-star general. He was not that way as a 1-star general. I worked for him then too. But as a 3-star officer, he was a maximum butt kisser. He is also one of the general officers that signed the letter back in the 2020 that said Trump could not be president again, that he was an awful president because he's an asshole. But he illegally published orders so Lindsey Graham could go to the AOR, the area of responsibility, a hostile fire zone, on active duty orders when he was not authorized to do that based on the status that he was in. So I speak with authority when I tell you I know how I would react in these situations because I've been placed in these situations before. And unfortunately, not a lot of people, again, it's so hard to explain what it's like being on the inside of that machine because they will spit you out in a heartbeat. Kelly, go ahead.
Thanks, Colonel. I was just thinking to myself, when I think it was Avell and Sony, they were talking about the DSM and its classification. I was trying to get to that point too, so I apologize. I'm being on the road. I'm home now, so I can talk in a less retarded way. But yeah, it's definitely all political. But so with the APA giving its new classification for the DSM-5 and DSM-5-TR, for those who aren't familiar, it's a Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, text revised. So even though they do have those newer classifications, the WHO has a different classification system, but with whatever's that notwithstanding, it's becoming a more and more increasingly protected status or considered hate speech to go on ahead and speak out against that kind of stuff. And it's really kind of scary. And then the thought of, the former stuff being not just, quietly allowed, like don't ask, don't tell in the military, but welcomed and celebrated, through video propaganda and whatnot. It's more than just a slap in the face for the military and the populace for Constitution. They're, charged with protecting and upholding. I'm just wondering how they're supposed to combat that, I guess.
Well, and it goes back to what he just said about the cultural Marxism. Again, being on the inside of the military, I would have never imagined the military susceptible to it, just because we were taught about it. We looked through historical examples of the at least what we were told was cultural Marxism, of it happening and how you guard against it. And it's happening all around us now, and it's warmly embraced, as you just pointed out. It's quite amazing to watch. Abel, go ahead.
Yeah, it's scary actually, picking up on what you were just saying and a little what you're saying, Q, Kelly, too. I feel like what's happening is what would have happened in the Salem witch trials. And Trump keeps saying it's a witch hunt. There was a mass psychosis of the people that believed what the girls stirred up. So we are going to have to combat this at all levels. And there's a wonderful verse in the Bible in Thessalonians 2:9-12. If you want me to read it, it's just a couple verses, and it talks about how you're protected from the great delusion.
Go ahead.
Okay. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause, God shall send them a strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believe not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. So I believe myself, maybe there's more than one strong delusion, but I believe this could be the strong delusion that the masses are falling under. So it has to be dealt with. Teachers, nurses, doctors, everywhere. It's a massive problem.
So there actually could be,
yeah,
sure. There could actually be several of them. I mean, obviously COVID was one of those as well. But the part that I loved that you just read was the love of the truth. And that's my agenda. That goes back to what I said about Miles. We cannot move on. We have a love of the truth. I want the truth. I want the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And I'm not moving on until I get it. Miles, go ahead.
I was in a space earlier and they were talking about Trump's admin picks, and people were DMing me, Miles, take a mic. And I went, no, I know when to shut up, because I was getting very pissed about what they were talking about, because when was it okay to launch a bioweapon against us? And that's what it was. And so you had these people talking like, well, yeah, this pick's going to be okay because they're just going to talk, they speak really well, and they're not going to do that again to us. And I couldn't take a mic because I would have gone off the rails. But that's what we're faced with. Like there are laws against bioweapons, and that's what was done against the populace. So yeah, I want somebody in there that we're gonna see some justice for all the people that they killed on purpose. It was planned. Event 201. I know what they were gonna do. So yeah, I don't know how we're gonna work this one out, because it goes into all sectors where these people were compliant and they were making money off death. It's disgusting.
We're going to get the truth. Carrie, go ahead.
Yeah, someone was saying earlier that we have to change ourselves, and Tucker Carlson says that exact thing, and he says how he did it was he decided never to lie. Never, ever, ever, ever. And I also decided that long, long ago. And it's really, really difficult because, you really can't hide anything. And you have to admit shit and you get in trouble. But fuck that, I don't care. And the other thing is, Bill Gates funds the WHO. And Trump has talked about that China is behind the WHO. And I'm not sure if he's like covering his ass or something, but if I was him, I would fucking cover my ass. And the other thing is, prisons are doing some really shady shit with the transition thing. I know from Bradley Manning, who became Chelsea Manning, that he went through transition in prison, and that was a long time ago, and that was, you know, something that we the fucking people paid for.
Yep. We're going to go with one more, and then I'm going to say something about your comment about lying, because it's a great comment. Annie, go ahead, and then Annie's going to be the last one. I got to run fix dinner before I go back on the pond.
Hi, Colonel. Hi, Trump Frog and Stellar and everybody. Hi. Thanks for letting me come up. You know, I came in late today because I'm going into work late tonight, and I'm on my way. But I just heard the part where you said, yeah, just because some guy wants to dress up like a woman, and they're your superior, they expect everybody to go along. Oh, believe me, I was there too in the National Park Service when I had gone on a detail in Utah, and I had a superintendent, because I was technically under the superintendent as a division head. And and he was a she and wore skirts and everything. And I was like, yeah, awkward. You know, it's like, if you want to do that on your own time, no problem. But professionally, yeah, that doesn't work. I agree 100%. Thank you for letting me speak.
Sure. I just want to close this out by talking about what Carrie just said about lying. You know, you grow up where telling little white lies or whatever is not considered the end of the earth. But I'm going to share with you guys something, because I found this profoundly freeing once I figured out what was going on. I grew up in a very dysfunctional alcoholic family. You guys have heard me tell you the story about my dad being a long distance truck driver, and I was not really ever close with my mom. One of the reasons why I was never close with my mom is because my mom was an alcoholic. And every time my dad went on the road, my mom drank. And she never drank when my dad was home, which is kind of, you know, much worse than the other way around. But anyway, when you grow up with someone that's dysfunctional, regardless of whatever the dysfunctionality happens to be, you as a kid learn how to lie, and you lie a lot, because when just stupid stuff, when kids want to come over to your house and spend the night, well, you tell them a lie because you don't want them to see your mom drunk. And it's little things like that. You lie about things. When someone asks, hey, can your mom come pick me up? You just immediately come up with a lie as to why. And it's not ever, well, no, because she's probably drunk, because little kids don't talk like that. So you come up with another lie that, you know, she's busy doing this or she's busy doing that. And you have no idea, as you become a teenager and you get a job, and just how easy lying has become. It's part of who you are. It's reflective. You don't even think about it. And when you, especially like for me, I'm away from home, and I would be in a situation where there's no reason not to say the truth. It's like, oh, the sun is out, and you would go, no, it's not, it's nighttime, or, you know, just something reflectively, a lie, and you immediately to yourself would go, what the hell did I just do? Why did I say that? That doesn't even mean anything. It makes no difference. Why would I not tell the truth? And anything that is you have learned to do by rote, you know, like an automatic reflection, as opposed to tell the truth, you just reflectively say something that's off the top of your head, which may or may not be true. And when I discovered that, which was very early on after I left home, it was a conscious effort from then on, like at age 19, I can't do this. This is like the craziest thing ever. I didn't even know at that point why I did it. But later on in 1987, I met my best friend that I've ever had in my entire life. I call her my life coach. And she also grew up with an alcoholic parent, and she had a degree in counseling and all this other stuff. And her and I were talking about that one day. And she explained to the entire phenomenon on why you do it, why it's reflective, and all this stuff. And I am sitting there in total amazement as she's telling me it's because your mom was an alcoholic parent, the chaos that you live in, you'd never know when you walk in whether your mom's going to be passed out on the couch or whatever. Your entire world is chaos. And the way that you order chaos as a child is by these falsehoods, so that everything on the outward appearance is normal to you. And that's how you combat the internal chaos of your family life, is by projecting this normalcy to people. And you do that by lying. And that's kind of like a transition for you. And because it's so built into your, and I had already I'd worked myself out of doing that as a reflex. But I found it fascinating to finally understand why people actually did that. And so fast forward, a couple of years later, I had an NCO, and she was like, 35 years old. She had 2 little kids, and she would just off the cuff lie. And I sat her down one day. Her name's Janice, and I loved her to death. She was one of the best NCOs I ever had. And I said, I'm going to ask you something. You can tell me it's none of my business, but was one of your parents an alcoholic? And she looked at me and immediately burst into tears. And she goes, how did you know that? And I said, because I used to be you. I know exactly what you're doing, and you're going to destroy your military career. You can't lie to people about insignificant, stupid shit. And I told her my story, and I told her what I had done to fix it. That girl for the next, 25 years became one of my most treasured friends inside of the military, because constantly she was telling me I would have never been able to stay in the military. She retired. She, became a senior ranking enlisted person, and her career just like blossomed. So that kind of reinvigorated me in looking at people, especially from what we've talked about today, about the recognizing patterns, recognizing people's mental, capabilities and deficiencies, and then being honest about the assessment of them, and helping our fellow humans through this life journey, as we all have experienced things that other people can benefit from the knowledge of that. I think sharing that is, number one, it gives you the affirmation that you have moved on and you have grown as a result of that, because none of us obviously can control the situations we're in as children, but we can all help each other transition into being functioning adults. And one of those things is acknowledging when someone is lying to you, and acknowledging when things are not what they appear to me. They are asking me, by pretending that a man can be a woman, to go back to my childhood where I had to lie about everything. And I'm not going back. I'm not going back for anybody. I'm going to live in the truth. It took me a long, hard road to get to the truth in my own personal journey. And the fuckers aren't going to mess around with me. I'm not going back. That would be like going back to me being 10 and pretending my mom's not a drunk anymore. I'm not doing that. So anyway, and in case any of you guys are worried, my mom passed away several years ago. So I don't have to worry about her listening to any of this, other than the fact she's in heaven and she knows all of this is to be true now. So anyway, we're going to close out on that, and we will be back at like 8:15 ish with the pond with Trump Frog, and we're going to talk about 8:30.
8:30.
All right, 8:30. Thank you. Stellar, you and Trump Frog have any last comments?
Yeah, I just want to say the Operation Gladio on the social platform with Dr. Jan Halper and the Gay Lion and all of those people, it needs to be addressed, because Jan Halper has been going around Dr. Psyop and saying that she's in close contact with Donald Trump. And I just want to say it because it's a recorded space. She literally said she was upset with the rep from Oregon who wrote the cease and desist letter from her when she was in the UK with the Republican Party, because he was going against Paul Ryan. That tells you exactly who Dr. Larper Psyop is.
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring her up. One of the when she first came over on to Truth Social, I was like, this woman's crazy. Yeah, she exudes that standoffish kind of thing.
Fooled. I even said it. I was fooled she was a nice lady, but I can tell you what she's doing now. And when I heard her in that space with Tish's space about her being upset with the guy from Oregon because he was going against Paul Ryan, it says everything you need to know about Dr. Larper.
Yep, you're right.
She's a liar.
Yep, she definitely is. Stellar, any closing thoughts?
Sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much. All right, guys. Kelly?
Be fun. Good to see you. I'm gonna try to come in the pond tonight. 5:30 is when my little kiddos my kids start their baton lessons, but I can be in the car by that time, and so I will try to be on a stable connection so I can come in.
Awesome. And beware of those Decepticons out there.
Yep.
Decepticon, Transformers, all that, yeah.
Well, the Decepticons were the bad Transformers, so that's why they're Decepticons.
I feel you do. I know what they are. I remember that Michael Bay movies do those. Don't get me started. I sold TVs when those things came out. Okay, that was I watched those movies so many times.
Had them on a loop in the showroom.
Yeah, because 1080p TV. Anyway, we don't need to get into that, but yeah, it was,
That's
frame
funny.
rates on them were just everything was dope. Michael Bay did a really good job with his movies.
All right. Yeah. All right, everybody. Have a nice evening. See you tonight at 8:30.
And God bless everyone.
God bless.